Welcome! This is Sophie, the food blogger behind A Kitchen in Uganda, and what you're listening to is our new podcast called Our Food Stories, a podcast where we as a community share food stories from our past that have raised and sustained our ancestors and eventually ourselves. Episode 7. In the previous episode, we listened to a detailed recollection of stuffed pumpkin luombo and learned terms of items such as luombo, akabo, ebyai, and endagala that are used in cooking. This episode, although told by a different special guest, is almost a continuation of where we stopped. You will learn more terms, more foods, and methods of cooking, and the storyteller's view and experience with some of the foods. Let's get into it. My name is Enid Nansubuga. I am Ugandan, born and raised in Kampala, the capital city of Uganda. I'm, however, originally from Buaya in PG district in central Uganda. And PG is pretty much lush and green vegetation. We receive rains in March and May and also in September and November. PG is in Buganda. So most people in PG, I would say, are Baganda. And there are some foods that are just Baganda foods. Of course, other people eat them as well. But Baganda, I would say, are known for matoke. Matoke are green bananas. I would say they're different from the yellow bananas that are sweet and ripe. These are just green bananas with sap for the most part. So what they do is that they peel the bananas and then they clean the sap off and they're steamed. You could steam them or you could boil them and then you mash them. But the idea is to steam them. So they wrap these banana leaves from the banana tree and they wrap the matoke, the washed matoke, in the banana leaves and then they steam them. So after a certain part, they get soft and then they get them off the whatever you're using to cook. Usually it's a sigiri, which is a charcoal burning kind of stove or gas. It depends on what you're using. So anyway, when they're softened, they take them off, then they press them, like they try to mash them, but they mash them with the hands. Like the pros use their hands. They just wrap their hands around the matoke, the banana leaves, and they mash them together. Those are like the pros, the grandparents. I don't see people doing it like that anymore. But now us, the kids who are new to the game, usually we use a spatula or a cloth while we dip our hands in cold water so as to kind of try to minimize the burning. So that's what we do most of the time. And then we soften the matoke and then we put them back on the sigiri, the charcoal stove. And then after some time, when all the water has been drained out through steaming, we take the matoke off and then we serve it. So it's more like mashed potatoes, but think of it as mashed bananas. And you probably won't use a spatula if you're old school. You'll use your hands. So matoke, that's how it's prepared most of the time. Then we have beans. We have muwogo. Muwogo is cassava. We have sweet potatoes. We have endagu. I don't know what endagu is in English. Endagu and balugu. I don't know what those are in English, but there are like a brown or a white, smaller sweet potato, I would say. And they don't really have taste. So what you serve them with is what gives them the taste. I really can't tell the difference. We eat Irish potatoes as well. We eat lots of different foods. We eat luombo. You won't find most families prepare luombo on a daily. Luombo is more like a party kind of food, like a celebratory kind of food, and it's actually stew. I'm not really sure how they make it. I know that's embarrassing as a Muganda. I've actually even never made it, and the worst part of it all though is I'm not really a fan of luombo. I know most Baganda looking down on me like I've betrayed them. And we have mayuni. Mayuni are yams, and I found that in America, where I'm currently living in USA, there are yams and there's sweet potatoes. And there's this kind of debate of which is which. So we have yams, which are those purple and white kind of tubers as well. And I like yams, but not so much. Yeah, I like yams with fried eggs. That's how I like my yams. But I will probably not ask for yams. You won't find me cooking yams. Then I love posho kawunga. Posho is maize flour. Yes, it's maize flour, corn flour. Posho is pretty much like close to how you would make mashed potatoes. Posho, how I make it is different, because how I make it is faster. So what I do is I put the posho flour in a saucepan, and then I pour hot water over it, and then I mix it to kind of make a paste. But the more water you make, the more watery it is. So it depends on the consistency that you like. But how I make it is that I mix it and mix it and mix it. I keep adding flour to whatever the consistency that I want, and then I let it rest. I make it on the stovetop. I don't use banana leaves to wrap it, which is what most people do. Comes out really soft and nice though, but I don't have time for that. I just mingle it like that. So I love posho. Those are like Baganda foods. There's a lot of foods that I do not even remember. We like rice. We like nakati. Nakati is a kind of green. We like jobio. Jobio is pumpkin leaves. And how my mom used to make them, she used to get the pumpkin leaves, and then she would put eggs in them, and then she would kind of like make this mixture of like a fried egg and jobio. Oh, I love it, and I actually miss it. I've tried to make it, but I just don't make it as well as she does. For sauces, Baganda loves stews. I think actually it's like a central Uganda thing. We love stews. We love fish stew. We love soups, sauces. We love beef stew. We love groundnut pest stew. We love beans. We love rabbit stews. We love turkey stews. Like most of our sauces, well, they are sauces. Like you rarely find a main dish without a stew, and you rarely find a meal without butunda. Butunda is passion fruit. Usually they mix it with oranges as a juice. And you'll also find that most foods will have a side of greens. Greens could be anything. Some people like a nakati. Then you will find a sukuma wiki. So sukuma wiki are collard greens. And then we have spinach. I don't know what spinach is in Luganda. And then there is the red one. Embuga. You'll find embuga is like the red amaranth. Then you'll find mboga, which is cabbage. I'm not a fan of cabbage, never have been. But anyway, so those are like the most Baganda foods that you will find, you know. I hope I've done my people justice. And we love binyebwa. Binyebwa is pretty much just nuts, but it's the thing is that in Uganda, when somebody says ground nuts, it will mean, well, ground nuts pretty much means nuts that are ground, right? Like you're grinding them to make that consistency that is powdery, and then you cook them, you boil them, you grind the nuts. When you go to Uganda, especially in central Uganda, and somebody says ground nuts, they might mean peanuts that are whole, or they will mean ground peanuts that have been grounded into powder, and then they're going to make them into a sauce. So when you find somebody saying they want ground nuts, they might be eating whole peanuts, or they might be eating the groundnut sauce. Just bear with us. That's how we roll. So anyway, so these groundnuts, the way I like groundnuts is if they're mixed with something. That is if they add them to beef, or if they add fish, like a dried tilapia to them, different types of fish. I like tilapia. That is how I like my nuts, my groundnut sauce. Otherwise, I'm not really a fan of groundnuts. So those are our foods, and how we used to eat the foods, how Baganda used to eat growing up. It was more like compared to what it is now, people used to gather together, and you'd have the kids, they would place mats on the floor. So you'd probably have kids and the women sitting on the floor, and maybe the men would sit up on the stools. And how we did it growing up, and my grandparents, the way they served food was different from how my actual home with my mom and my dad used to serve the food. And my grandparents, they used to serve my grandpa first, because he was the man of the house. They would serve him first, and then they'd get the kids together, place us all on the mat, and then they would serve us. And then my grandma would eat last, as she'd been preparing. She would serve us, and she would serve her kids, like our aunties and uncles and, you know, my parents, and then she would eat last. Or, well, she'd serve herself last, and then she would join us. She wasn't like eating by herself in the kitchen or anything like that. So that's how they used to serve us. And a typical breakfast at my grandparents' home was katogo. Katogo is pretty much two foods brought together, like maybe like a carbohydrate and protein. So you'd find like a cassava. Mostly katogo is, when somebody says katogo these days, they mean matoke, whole matoke, that is, with tripe or offals. Offals in Uganda, not stomach, are cow intestines, which is tripe, really. So when most people say katogo, they used to mean matoke and tripe together. But these days, when you ask somebody, they'll tell you katogo, and they would be like akachi. Akachi means akachi, katogo akachi, which means so you want a mixture of what? So it could be cassava and beans, akatogo ka muwogo n'ebijanjalo, or matoke and nuts, G-nuts, ground nuts. We just went over that. The actual ground nuts, the sauce, the paste, the stew. Or it could be lumonde and beans. I'm not a fan of that myself. Or it could pretty much be a mixture of anything. Like you could mix anything and just call it katogo. It could be matoke and beef, pretty much. But my grandparents, katogo was mostly matoke and offals or cassava and beans. I love cassava and beans, and then you put some ghee in it. So ghee is the omuzigo. Ooh, I love ghee. So ghee and pretty much for me, ghee and beans. And I make the meanest beans. Like, I do not cook much. I don't know how to cook a lot of things, but I make the best beans. Let me tell you how I make my beans. How I make my beans, that I boil them. Usually I soak them the night before. If they're dry, if they're fresh, I just, go ahead and cook them. So if they're dry, I'll soak them the night before, and in the morning I'll boil them. Dried beans take quite a while to soften, like to cook. And then after I'm done with them, I mush them. See, I mush the beans, right? And then I put in a separate pan, I put the onions, the tomatoes, whatever it is that I'm using, my secret recipes, my spices that I use, I won't tell you about. And then I put my beans. They are heavenly. Like when we used to go and my friends came home and they were hangover, they would ask for my beans. So what I used to do was make the beans the night before. So the morning we're hangover, we're just eating beans and matoke.
To be honest, we could listen to Enid for days. I love how she recalls all these foods with the fondest of memories, but is also honest about what she liked and did not like. Make sure to catch part 2 in the next episode, where Enid will be continuing this story and sharing a list of some delectable and even new to us fruits that she enjoyed as a child. If you enjoy these stories and you have a delicious food story you would love to share or know someone that does, don't hesitate to reach out to me via email at akitcheninuganda@gmail.com or Instagram at akitcheninuganda. See you in the next episode.